Hello, everyone, and thank you again for tuning in to Tetra's YouTube channel. You probably got the theme of this by now, but assuming that you haven't seen my face before, I am Eric Mullendijk, the National Coordinator of Tetra. And as I've said many times and will continue to do so, it gives me the privilege to have worked with and interacted with my guest today and other great volunteers. Hello, Radu Pastoli.
Eric, how you doing?
Good, thanks. So Radu, I'm really happy to do this interview. Anybody who knows you knows you're a super busy guy and you're currently working for yourself. So you are the definition of time is money. So we'll try not to keep you too long this morning, but you recently passed this year a 10-year Tetra anniversary. You first heard of Tetra back in 2010.
Right.
And I figured that everybody's got a unique story of how they got involved with Tetra, and you've literally covered every aspect of it. So I thought we'd start there. In 2010, why don't you take us back? You were an engineering student at UBC, and how did you first get introduced to the existence of Tetra?
Right. So I was finishing up my last year at UBC, and I was in the mechanical engineering department capstone design project. Even though I was in the integrated engineering department, this was sort of a joint project course. And we were sitting there through all the presentations from different clients and different partners that the department was developing. And you were there, and Pat Tweedy were there, and you pitched this idea for an elevating wheelchair. And I just found it so fascinating, the amount of impact that type of device was creating or could create for the client that you had. And also the fact that you were there yourself presenting, and with Pat, it just seemed like a really great organization. So I was very drawn to the project, and so were a couple of my classmates. So we decided to take it on for the year.
Yeah, what I remember is I think there was 5 of you, which was a pretty sizable student group, and I think somewhere in the archives we still have. So what, for those who are watching, what Radu is describing, of course, and I know this is true of myself, if you're in a wheelchair, it's not like you can just change your position easily or get down on a floor. And so this chair would lower all the way down so somebody could scoot out of their chair, or more importantly, as we know, if you're in a sitting position, you're always looking up, and this chair actually raised, and somebody in a wheelchair could be at eye level during a conversation.
Right. And that's a fascinating thing too, as as students, we didn't quite have as much exposure up to that point about working with people with disabilities. So we didn't have a full understanding of all the needs and all the benefits of different devices. So we really found it interesting to go and do interviews with not just the client, but other stakeholders, other wheelchair users, and discover all the benefits that this type of device could create. And one of the most interesting ones for us was actually the social benefit of, like you said, Eric, being at eye level, and surprisingly, even the social benefit of being below the seating level, to be able to interact with kids, so that you're not then above them.
Yeah, yeah, and just, I don't know if you know this, but that project, one of the engineering mentors on that project was longtime volunteer Jay Drew. And
Right.
Jay has since taken the designs and as he and another engineer have further developed the prototype, and they're hoping to see if they can get it used by people in their daily life, and maybe even at one point try and take it to market. So the capstone from 10 years ago still lives on. So, but from that, you had that experience. And then what was the decision? Because Tetra's been fortunate to do a number of capstones with a number of universities throughout Canada and even online in the States. But a very small percentage of the students in the capstone actually stay on as volunteers, but you did. You went on, the next step was you became a Tetra volunteer and started working on actual Tetra projects. And what made you decide, hey, I want to continue to commit to this organization, or what was feeding your interest as far as wanting to become a volunteer?
Right. I think there are a few reasons. I'd say one of the big ones was attending the monthly volunteers meeting. So we got to attend that meeting to present our project, and we saw other volunteers also presenting updates on their projects. So I really liked the collaborative nature of those meetings and getting to see the breadth and scope of all the benefits and all the positive work that the volunteers were doing to help others. So that's kind of what drew me to the organization, that structure. But then also getting a chance to meet you and Pat and some of the other people at the society, and just realizing what a great organization it was. So there's also the benefits as a student in your final years. You're trying to figure out what you're going to do after you graduate. And, people were always saying, volunteering is one really good way to not only find a benefit for your skills, but also build some experience yourself. So it's definitely an opportunity for me to learn new technical skills and apply what I had already learned. So it's a good resume builder too.
And of course, as you're coming to these meetings, you're you're seeing something being developed. And around the time
Mhm.
as I was getting to know you, a couple years before, I was hit by a car when I was crossing the street. And you talked about the volunteer meetings, and other volunteers were brainstorming. And when I was hit, it was in late November. So around this time, Christmas lights were being put up or on houses. And our volunteer group was like, well, what if we took that kind of flashing light system, that LED system, and put it on wheelchairs? So this was just a brainchild to help people. And for a while, we were doing it as a regular Tetra project. And then we realized we're getting so many requests. And, lots of our volunteers, they like to do a project and then move on, because the newness of helping someone or a new project is um, really what they find beneficial, or what interests them in Tetra is the variety. So we realized if we wanted to really make a lighting system that may make a difference, we needed a point person. And lucky for Tetra, you happen to have the skills and the time. And so you went from, working on volunteer projects when you could, while having your own engineering career, to then really being the point person of what we call Tetra Gear. And when you talk about developing skills and resume, that was quite a journey for a number of years. And for those who have seen the lighting system, I can give a little demo here. So for those who haven't seen these turned on, you've seen me in the interviews with this kind of lighting stick. So this is what it is here. And white was always my favorite color. So just for old time's sake, and the line never gets old. I can flash, and it's on the flexible gooseneck. So I'm going to turn it over to you, Radu. That was to take you down memory lane, but of course you put in countless hours to design this. And just talk a little bit about all your efforts to get Tetra Gear out in the market, and what drew you to that.
Right. I was gonna say that almost looked like a lightsaber on video.
Yeah.
uh, yeah. So by the time I got involved with the Tetra lights, I believe, Eric, I don't know if that was 2014, 2015 or so. It had already been a few years, and I think the volunteers had developed a lot of different prototypes. And the interesting thing was that the prototypes themselves were gaining a lot of traction. So, Eric, you were telling us stories about bumping into people on the streets with your early prototypes, and they're saying, hey, those are really cool, where can I get those? And you would tell them, well, it's not something you can purchase right now, but we'll hook you up with some volunteers and they'll make something custom for your chair. So I think eventually there's about 50 or so of these prototypes out and about in the lower mainland. So what was really fascinating is that demonstrated the need, and it demonstrated the fit of this device and the fact that it's really got some potential. So as a volunteer working on other projects, I became aware of this through those monthly meetings, and I was really fascinated by the opportunity to take it one step further beyond just one-offs. So that's when we started having meetings with yourself, with all the stakeholders, with the executives at the society, and we started coming up with a strategy on how we could really scale this up and find a way to not only create benefit for the maximum number of people, but then also see if this is something commercially sustainable and viable for the society. So I'd say those early on meetings really sort of carved the path for where to take this. And we started bringing on more volunteers, and soon enough, we realized, okay, well, how are we going to actually scale this and turn it into a product? And we were talking to some government agencies for fundraising, and they said, well, you need to create a for-profit entity so that you're able to attract all the finance and all the grants and funding that commercial enterprises can attract.
And you're really being modest. You really were the point person, and came up with business plans. And I mean, I'm happy to say the Tetra Gear social venture still exists, and we sell the lights online. And another thing about you, from an engineering aspect, that a lot of the Tetra volunteers share, is you like things to be aesthetically pleasing. And one of the memories I have is when we were marketing the lights. I think arguably one of your favorite things is we met up one night and you did some promotional shots of the lights, and you took them from different angles, and you joked that if it didn't start raining, we might still be there. So definitely there was a lot of good memories. And I don't know if people can see, I'll move the lights to the other side, but behind me is a Tetra Gear sign. And for the better part of a year, they were actually being manufactured by other members of the team that you mentioned, and that was the sign that hung on the side of the building. So we aren't currently manufacturing them right now, but we still do have them to sell. And if we went into all the hours that you put into designing and making them, it would be a much longer interview. But you've commented to me, you still see quite a few of them, the different varieties, out in Vancouver. And I'd be remiss if I didn't mention they can also go on strollers. We talked about connecting with kids earlier, and of course bicycles. So
Totally.
it is.
It's I hear that from other people too. Other even out here in Abbotsford, my father-in-law had a student that had the Tetra lights, and it just sort of completed the circle. And it just it's fascinating to see how much of an impact that it's had, and how many people we've been able to reach, even with the resources we had available.
So, and as I said, the Tetra Gear brand is still available and up on the website. That website again is just tetragear.com. And aside from that, you are in the field of engineering. This is your own workshop, and currently, right now, you are working for a medical device company, correct?
That's correct. I was actually working for so the company is called Arbutus Medical, and they make devices that are affordable for developing countries for orthopedic surgery. But those devices have also gained traction now in developed countries and in North America because of how affordable they are and how they can disrupt the healthcare system to make things significantly more affordable. So right, I was working with them back in 2016, 2017. Then I moved out to Abbotsford, took another job out here closer to home. And now that I'm working out of my shop, as you can see, I'm mostly a freelancer, but also part-time now with Arbutus Medical, helping them develop the next generation system.
Well, I was going to say this interview is taking place in a very fitting location, right in your workshop. And I don't think it would surprise anybody because it takes a special person to volunteer and help others. And you're doing that in your own career. And also, another person that you work for has also volunteered for Tetra and done devices as well. So, the company that you work for and yourself, Radu, is a shining example of giving back and using your skills. I guess in closing, because you've had a variety of different experiences, we talked about Tetra Gear and you've worked for a number of different companies. I was just curious, how have you seen engineering change yourself as far as a field since you started?
Right. It's only been 10 years. And I think from an engineering standpoint, at least in the mechanical engineering and device land, I'd say there's been uh, even more growth in the 3D modeling CAD world, but then also in the rapid prototyping tools available. I think that's one of the biggest things. In 2010, getting something 3D printed wasn't really that easy, and I didn't even really know much about it back then. And now everybody has a 3D printer. So I'd say that's probably the biggest thing, these rapid prototyping. So you've got, the FDM printers, the filament printers, but then some of the fancier ones these days, the SLA printers, that's that one right there. It's a stereolithography printer. So it uses a resin tank with laser beams that actually turn a liquid resin into a solid piece. So you can have a piece of plastic that looks like it's been injection molded, but it's actually 3D printed and it's strong like a finished product. So I'd say that's been the biggest development.
And the piece that you just showed, how long did that take?
A piece like this takes maybe, I'd say, 3 hours to print or so.
And
So
certainly, I know some of our volunteers have their own 3D printers and have made 3D printers have been a viable source in all of our chapters to make devices. Well, Radu, I don't want to keep you too long, and I thank you so much for taking us into your workshop and sharing some memories, and again, what you've done for Tetra and in helping start Tetra Gear, pun intended, continues to shine brightly. And I know I feel safer when I use it, and my family is very appreciative that I'm not being hit by cars, and I know who others who use it are also appreciative to have the safety and something that looks good as well. So thanks so much for making the time for this interview, and I look forward to seeing you again sometime soon.
cheers, Eric. It was my pleasure.
Okay.